Hello, and welcome to another edition of Storytelling on Orchard Street. I'm your host, Pete Solomita, and we are in the broadcast studios of P&T Knitwear Bookstore on Orchard Street. With me is Mimsey Mack. Mimsey is a singer, mother of six, former physical therapist, half Ironman finisher 2011, current licensed massage therapist, and a singer, songwriter, bassist, drummer, button poet, and comedian, and all-around cool person. Welcome, Mimsey.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Yes, it's my pleasure. So I have a bunch of things to ask. I just want to mention that you don't have it on here, but I know you through an open mic you run at Freddie's twice a month. So
Yes.
we'll talk about that at some point.
Alrighty.
When I did my notes, one of the first things that jumped out at me was, wow, 6 children. I'm one of 7, but I only have 1 kid. So what's that been like?
I just love kids, always have, and so it was a wonderful adventure. I basically had our first son. It was beautiful, and then 2 years later, we were surprised with twin girls. And I was like, hey, we broke the barrier. We don't have 1 kid for each arm. Let's keep going. So we had another son, and then a couple of years later, we had another son and daughter. So we're like the Brady Bunch,
right?
3 girls and 3 boys.
I'm amazed that you did all these things in your life with that on your plate.
Well, I was born with a lot of energy, and
You still have a lot of energy. I noticed that. You seem like you're doing stuff all the time. I don't know how you do it.
I'm grateful that I can do a lot of things.
I've been really busy lately too, and I find this urge now at my age, like I don't want to get too deep into it, but when you get to a certain age, you're like, oh my God, let me count down. What do I have left?
Yeah, I don't quite do that. I just pretend like I'm Benjamin a bunny.
Yeah,
I'm just going backwards.
I feel like I want to leave the planet with a lot of my stuff out there.
Yeah, why not?
So you started to go back into your background, which wasn't on this piece of paper I'm holding, and I was really fascinated. And I asked you, hey, save it for the show.
Right.
So, let the audience know what your life was like pre this part of it.
Yeah, so I was kind of raised in a little bit of a chaotic home, and I decided, I was at a summer camp, a Christian camp, to become a born-again Christian. Just made a lot of sense. It was a great formula for the American dream. So I dove in, and I was raised in a musical home, and I didn't really feel like the creativity was my thing. I was an athlete, and so I just went head in and had that good life.
So your family was Lutheran, and how old were you, and what was the impetus for you becoming born-again Christian and your family not being that?
Yeah, so my mom, we were Lutheran. My dad only went when he was forced to go, and my mom liked teaching Sunday school, and I liked, wearing the white robe when I was, I liked all the procedures behind it. I loved the hymns, but it was not our family was definitely not, having Christian principles. We were a creative family that was definitely outside the box.
And how did this happen?
The
born again for you?
Yeah, so it was, I just didn't want to have the life that I was raised in. I didn't want to, end up like that.
And how old were you when you made that?
I was about probably 13.
Okay, so that's an age where people quite,
Yeah, it was right before my freshman year, and I just gotten into partying. I'd been partying that summer as an 8th grader with the kids from the neighborhood, and it just made sense. My best friend were like, yeah, let's have the clean life, and I became a leader, and mentored other kids eventually, and took it into college with me, and then raised my kids that way.
Okay, and so we know each other through music and poetry and open mics, and you've done a lot of that throughout your life. So how did you go from being a mom of 6 and doing physical therapy, and then suddenly being in New York City with this whole different kind of life?
Yeah, so basically, the marriage dissolved. I'm actually writing a musical play.
Okay.
And my story, I went after the American dream, and I ended up finding a living nightmare. So it was everything I never thought it would happen to our family happened,
Right.
and it was very subtle and terrible. So I went through a divorce in about 2006 with my 6 kids. Moved back to my childhood home where I was raised, and again, I never thought I was a creative person, even though I was surrounded by music. My dad was a professional violist, trained in, Eastman School of Music in Columbia. And I was a little girl. My mom suffered with some depression, and I would, follow him around like a puppy dog at all his, musical events, and I loved it. But he didn't want us to become musicians, so I was like, I got it. I'll be the athlete. I'll be the scientist.
Right.
And so, so after my divorce, my son was a fantastic musician, and he kind of quit it after high school. And I was thinking, I always wanted to be a rock star, So I was like, why not?
So you wanted to be a rock star, but you were born again Christian?
Yeah. And
I mean, is that hard to? It's kind of a tough.
Well, that was before I was a born again Christian.
I see.
I was like 12 years old. I'd get my tennis racket out
right,
and get my sunglasses over. So I just
somewhere,
sounded cool.
Somewhere out there in the universe, there's a video of me when I was 6 or 7, imitating the Beatles. I wanted to be a Beatle. I guess it was probably 7 after seeing them on Ed Sullivan. And I'm not the only one. That's not. This is not startling news. But my father couldn't afford to buy me, because again, 7 kids, and he worked at the post office. He couldn't afford to buy me a Beatles wig, so he made one.
Oh, how beautiful!
And I had this little ukulele or something. Anyway, not too much about me, but so you had that rock star dream, but then you became a born again Christian. And again, this is getting off this maybe too much off the subject, but when I worked for a record distributor, the band I made the most money selling was Stryper. You remember them?
Yeah.
Do you remember that band?
Yeah.
So they were a born again Christian band. I guess it can work.
And that's what it's funny because people were like, do you remember this band, this band? I'm like, you'll understand. I was raised in a classical music home, and my big sisters listened a little bit to rock and roll. And then I became a born again Christian. So I was listening to Amy Grant, and all those guys. So I really, wasn't that exposed to rock and roll growing up.
And for the most part, you weren't really, you hadn't played an instrument up until when?
Well, it's interesting. So when I was in 6th grade, I was, I played violin in 5th grade.
Oh, okay. So you did have some background.
So I did. But my dad, because he had perfect pitch and he, was so brilliant, he didn't like even though I was second spot, he didn't like it. So I was like, next instrument. Tried the clarinet. I hated that because I had braces.
Why didn't he like it?
Well, he had perfect pitch. So if you practiced in front of him, he was like, ugh, that sounds terrible. So,
but he must have sounded terrible for him when he first started.
Well, that was many.
He must have forgotten, right?
He forgot.
And let's face it, the violin, if it's not played properly, can really.
And honestly,
I
was probably pretty good, but but again, he just didn't have the patience for it.
Or maybe he was afraid you were going to upstage him on the viola.
That was a secret. He knew how good I was.
Right. So it's funny because when I first met you, I just had this feeling that you were part of the rock and roll scene in New York City for a really long time, but I guess it's not the case.
I kind of feel like in another life I did.
Yeah.
Because I just connect with so many people, and when I finally started performing, I mean, I never thought I could be performing in front of people. Never.
Divorce, Virginia, New York City.
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah. So I dove into the music career after my half Ironman that finished was in November of 2011. I needed a break because I was pretty
tired.
What's
an Ironman like?
My gosh!
Talk a little more about that. I mean, it sounds like a cool title, but what does that mean?
Well, yeah. So I was always an athlete. So I knew how to run, knew how to swim, ride a bike. So when a friend said, "Hey, why don't you try triathlons?" I'm like, "Okay, that'd be a good distraction." So I did the shortest one. It was like a sprint and then an international. And then I like to dive in. So I said, "Hey, if I'm done those two, I might as well do a half Ironman." So basically, you have to swim 1.2 miles, and then you bike 55-ish miles, and then you do 13.1 mile run.
I couldn't do one of those 3 things.
Let me tell you. Well, it's just about like
Can you still do that?
No.
Okay.
If I wanted to, I could again.
Right, because you have to work up to it.
Yeah, it was really what I've discovered. The secret to anything is start small and build.
Of course.
Right. The sprint is like it's all doubled each time. So that was like 800 yards. It was easy, but it was just a dedication. I had to do. My schedule was all. Thank God my career as a physical therapist, I could manage my schedule around it. But I would just I had to eat certain food. I had to work out at the gym. I had to go running, swimming, biking.
Right.
But it was just so rewarding. And that that day, it was in November. It was in North Carolina. it was cold, but somehow I remember biking 46 miles into headwind.
Right.
And I was like, okay, but it was very, it's a great healing thing to do as well. So,
God.
yeah, I was very proud of it. When
I'm
I
one of
was
those people.
finished.
The New York City Marathon, which is 26.2 miles.
Right.
I only have to walk half a block. It goes up 4th Avenue in Brooklyn, and then so I'm really close to 4th Avenue. And I look at those people. I'm like, oh my God, good for them. I don't think I can do it, and it should inspire me. It inspires me to go back to bed because I'm tired for them.
I feel ya.
Right. So you brought pieces to read. I would like to talk more about, your life now and the music thing. But why don't you read something?
Yeah, so this is a little tiny backstory. So one thing that I like to say that music found me because I was told I wasn't a musician. And it was after, a pretty bad divorce and everything I believed in, it didn't make sense. So this is a song I wrote during my final custody battle. And I had been writing music, but I couldn't put any music behind it. It's called Everything Changed. I feel like dying. I don't want to live. The predator stole all I had to give. A mother first, but the perpetrator rules. I was called a whore, the sociopath, again fools. All the weak individuals are scared for their life. Allow me to endure everlasting strife. Don't talk to me like that. Who the hell are you, protecting and loving you? Yet you sing the blues. I call you baby and you spit in my eye. What the hell? Now I want to cry. I'm sorry for making the choices I did. You mirror your father. Now life is dread. The toxins you injected into my beautiful family. Now I live as a misfit with an itinerary. I can hardly breathe. Please pull the plug. Litter my body with the intoxicating drugs. All I wanted was love, peace, and joy. But I got smacked around like a broken toy.
Wow, that's pretty intense. Oh, so how did you recover from that?
Yeah, good question, right? Well, I'll be honest, it was music. I didn't even know when I was writing songs that really what I was writing.
Right.
I started, and so it's an ongoing thing. The grief, I mean, my your eyes water. It doesn't ever, it's kind of like, I like to think of it as, sometimes I think of it as if I had like my foot amputated. I'm never going to get my foot back, but
right.
you get a prosthetic, you can walk, but at night when you would go to bed, you'd have to take your prosthetic foot off. So you kind of know there's something that can't be replaced. But it's the joy and hope that, sharing music and hearing how it resonates with other people has really healed me.
Right.
For sure.
But it's still there. I can't, it can't leave. Do you mind if I read something?
Please do.
It's a little different form of grief, but just hearing you read that and talking about it, I remembered I just recently wrote this. And I wrote it because I heard this first sentence on the radio, a woman talking about grief, and then I wrote a piece from it. It's called Grief. Grief is a forever thing. It never goes away. I can feel your warm breath kissing me as I try to sleep, the lilt of your voice directing me as I transverse my day. I set the table for two, but fill just one plate. The flowers you picked have long died and wilted. Your to-do list half scratched out. It's too much for me to fulfill. Getting dressed is a chore. Without your opinion, I'm lost. Nothing seems to match anymore. The desk is littered with unopened mail and greeting cards not yet written. I play our favorite songs but only half listen. So what should I do to move on, to make the grief less demanding, move my life forward with you just a memory in it? That's a different kind of grief, the grief of losing somebody. But if you get a divorce and go through a really tough marriage, you're losing somebody because at some point it must have been good.
Yeah, it's interesting because that is a good point too. Like I've had to go back and say, you know what, 90% of my raising my kids was beautiful. We had so many rich experiences, camping and traveling and all the soccer games and but it
must make the bad hard to reconcile.
Yeah, it is hard to reconcile. Yeah, for sure.
Right.
But in fact, it was interesting that I tried to find a grief group to go to,
right.
But they were all about people they had physically lost to death, so I didn't quite feel like I could go. So it's been a journey to find out how to reconcile with this kind of grief.
This is the polar opposite of the song I heard you do.
I know, right?
Ice Cream.
Yeah, that was during COVID, I decided I need to write a happy song.
Right.
I'm going to have happy, upbeat, but I found my lyrics are very, I have a lot of expressive lyrics. In fact, I'm excited because I've been working on my story to share about domestic violence, but I recently been putting together a musical theater that tells my story, because I realized my songs all tell my story from beginning to end. So I'm excited to
even when they're not meant to.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't.
Right.
98% of them were not intentionally written for this purpose.
I love the fact that you sat down to write a happy song. I find that I find it much easier to write about difficult subjects, and it's not always about my difficulties.
Right.
If I hear this, I feel like I'm an empathetic person. I always have been. So if I hear about somebody else going through a tough time, and I try to capture that.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
It makes living with these things a little easier if you can get it out of your system.
Well, and one thing I realize is, when I've been in the darkest moments of my life in the grief, I think it's a universal feeling that you're alone. You're the only one that feels this desperate. And then by sharing, you realize you're not the only one.
And I think that's a precursor to, I hate to say this, but it can be the precursor to suicide. When you feel like you're the only one.
Oh, no, there were times I would be driving and my tears were so thick, and in Virginia, bridges are everywhere. And
Intense.
I literally thought, I'm doing it. And then one of my kids' faces would pop in my head, and I couldn't do it. I just couldn't. But I never did anything to commit suicide, but I definitely
You came
felt
close to the feeling of it.
Yeah, there's a song I never wrote, but it starts out, you can't kill me because I'm already dead.
Wow.
That's how I felt a lot of the time.
Right. Yeah, somehow I've never been to the point where I actively thought about suicide. And I guess it's that thing. I always find something to pull me out of the bad feeling. And if you have 6 kids, that's an important thing. I have one son, and I don't know how I would do that to him.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's hard enough to lose a parent in other ways.
Right.
And I think that way it makes it even more difficult.
Yes, definitely.
Do you want to share something else?
Sure. This is another one that this is during this one year, about 2017. This is called The Charmer Prevails. Can't anyone hear me? Can't anyone see it? Who will save my children? Who will save my children? The nightmares have returned. The numbness prevails. The moon is glowing. I've set my sails. They've turned their backs. What, are you crazy? My hope is fading. Life is but a haze. Oops, here's that line. I did put it in a poem.
Okay.
I didn't realize that.
All
You
right.
can't kill me. I'm
All right.
already dead.
Right.
The charmer is afraid now. It's time for bloodshed. Farewell to arms, for whom the bell tolls. Walk over the bridge. Don't fear the trolls. Can't anyone hear me? Can't anyone see it? Who will save my children? Who will save my children? Can't anyone hear me? Can't anyone see it? Who will save my children? Who will save my children? Please wake up. This can't be my life. My family has deserted me. I'll never be your wife. The glimmer of light is fading away. Let me close my eyes. Where's my disguise? Can't anyone hear me? Can't anyone see it? Who will save my children? Who will save my children? Can't anyone hear me? Can't anyone see it? Who will save my children? Who will save my children? Who will save my children?
Wow. And repeating that line really makes it powerful, because you must have felt that,
Yeah, it was. I'll tell you, it's pretty. One thing I learned. First of all, I want to say I purposefully became a born again Christian and chose my partner and the life, very clean life. Didn't drink, smoke, and barely cussed, because I didn't want anything bad to happen, and I certainly was not going to have any of the domestic violence that I saw kind of going on in my house. It was subtle,
right.
But just like what we all think is just subtle, the put downs and the little bit of violence now and again. And so when it happened, and then I went through the court experience, I mean, it's a helpless place. It's a lonely, helpless place.
Was it ever the opportunity to work it out? Like it must snowball, but in the beginning days, was there an effort? Or was it just too hard?
It's a pretty gory story. He was after a long marriage, and he had just he he had done things to my children that no father should do that I didn't know about. And that actually became
makes it
aware
even worse.
after I left him. I left him because he was threatening me in
Right.
dark, secret ways. And we were pillars of our church. You know, we were one of the
Right.
it families. You know, I was involved in everything, the youth group. He was a deacon in our church. So there was a lot of,
Do you
gaslighting.
think that sometimes makes this more easy for it to happen when a family's in that place?
Yes.
Is it,
I
it's
mean,
easier to hide it?
I didn't even know it was domestic violence.
Right.
I didn't know that when he hit me those times, when he kicked me, when he, choked me and did things randomly through the years, because it wasn't like every day. No marks were left. And, and now I realize that what I experienced as a child, I got worse as a wife.
Right.
You think you can escape it, but I was used to that.
Right.
So it was very subtle, and I learned what gaslighting is.
Sure.
It's a very subtle
By the way,
mind melt.
By the way, gaslighting was the number one word for the year. I just heard that on NPR.
Wow, really?
Yeah, because it's in the news a lot.
Well,
More from a political standpoint, but people are using it in this way also. And the thing is, I think one thing good about now is, and I hope this is true, that it was harder in your day as a mom back then because people didn't talk about this as much.
True.
So you probably felt alone. You probably didn't know there might be help out there, or the
Right.
other women were going through this, where now
Right.
it's a little more upfront.
Right.
It's still it's still difficult. It's difficult to be in any kind of violence in your life. I just don't understand that. Like, I don't understand. I can't
Right.
ever imagine hitting another person, but especially a woman, especially a woman that is, my relationship. I can't imagine. I can't even imagine getting in a fight with a guy, really.
Right.
but I can. Sometimes I think about it, like, I get cut off on the road or something.
Let me tell you, I can be a road rage.
Right.
But one thing I was actually reviewing some of the terminology for gaslighting last night when I was writing, and the tricky part is
It's a hard concept.
Oh, totally. Like
Right.
the first time I remember physical violence was actually our second anniversary. We were in a cute hotel, and I went from loving to him punching me in my arm, and I fall to the floor. But what happens is they blame you.
Right.
Then they forgive
That's the gaslighting part.
Then they forgive
Right.
you
They make
and
it-
tell you how much they love you.
Right.
And I'm your husband.
Right.
And you're just not going to do it again. But they become pitiful afterwards.
Right.
Then you feel bad for them.
They put you on the spot of you becoming the savior, or whatever you want to call
And then you get then you're like you get all confused and
Yeah, sure.
I didn't deserve that. Well, no, you did,
Yeah, they
but
make
it's
it your fault.
okay.
Right.
And then as a kid, I was the rambunctious kid. I was in the ER by the time I was 2 years old 3 times.
Wow.
Because I'd bumped my head,
Sure.
jumping around off the beds and things. So I was used to being physical. I was
Right.
an athlete, so to be blamed of that just didn't seem unusual.
Right.
But that's the thing that's why I'm working to be an advocate, because the tricky thing about domestic violence is, and why I thought I never would be one. I was educated, upper middle class.
It doesn't really matter though.
It doesn't matter. It's just, and I think what helps is what I've learned from my personal experience is that when you build your own self-esteem, it's all based on low self-esteem. That
Sure.
you allow someone to, so you build it up, and then it won't happen to you.
Right.
That's the prevention.
But it's not that easy once it's going to stop it.
No, like
you know?
again,
and you have 6 kids to worry about. Like, do I,
Yeah.
to make that move?
Yeah. Well, so in my case, again, I didn't even know it was domestic violence. I
Right.
got scared for my
Sure.
life, and we fled.
Right.
And then, so it took me a long, that was back in 2006. And it's
So it's
taken
really
me
not that long ago.
not that long,
Yeah.
but yet it feels like how much time has passed, and now I'm finally telling my story.
Right.
That's how long it took for me, for many reasons. I
Right.
wanted to wait till my youngest was at least 18, because
Right.
they didn't want me to share the story, and I won't
Well,
ever
I
share their
understand that.
names because they're private, and I'll
Right.
give details. But
Right.
it's a story that is heartbreaking.
Sure.
And to look at the choices that children have to make when they grow up after
Well,
being
you want
exposed to that.
It's one thing to take something on your own, but seeing your kids go through something has to make it magnify the pain.
Yes.
How are they doing now?
They're good. I have one son that unfortunately was affected, in a way that his choice was to basically believe the lies of his father, and
Right.
it happens a lot. And that
Sure.
this next poem is about that, the heartbreak of, it's called My Child, My Child.
Okay, why don't you read it?
Okay, it's called My Child, My Child. My child, I miss your smile. I've never been through a more painful trial. Falling prostrate, breaking heart. Your father's hands ripped us apart. Your father's hands ripped us apart. Oh, let it go. Oh, let it flow. My love is eternal for you, my sweet son. You're hypnotized, but the battle's not done. The army of angels covers you with their wings. To the moon and the sun, my soul does sing. To the moon and the sun, my soul does sing. Oh, radiant love. Oh, release within. Oh, oh. Do you hear my song from the twinkling star? Sweet melodies releasing your scars. You may not know what you say. You will be restored to step into the ray. You will be restored to step into the ray. Oh, let it flow. Oh, release within.
Wow. So I sometimes read my poetry, and it's not always about me, and I get choked up reading it. You know, it's almost like I'm going through the story. So what's happening with you when you read
Yeah,
it?
I mean, I haven't, honestly, I kind of purposely didn't
And
want
have
to
you read
them.
these things?
No, that's why I forgot that line was in there. I didn't
Right.
realize. No, were all written during 2017 and during the most horrific custody battle of my life. It was devastating.
So that's
it's very painful.
That's a long time after you moved out. So how did it
Yeah.
take why did it take so long?
It was crazy. It just everything was going fine, and just my one son was just getting rebellious, and he was a great kid, but he was struggling with what had happened to him.
Right.
And sometimes when things like this happen internally, a child decides that their perpetrator has to be not a perpetrator,
Right.
and so then they vilify and make the non-violent parent the violator. So that was his way to deal with his pain.
Well, let's face it. I mean, you had to reconcile what was happening with you and your husband and your children. But from their point of view, it's got to be really intense too. So,
Yeah, and if you knew, like, we had such a beautiful family home. Right. We were the house where all the neighbor kids came. We had a big backyard. Our house was colorful.
Right.
It was wonderful, and it literally ended in a split second.
Wow.
We literally fled one afternoon before he got home from work to friends from our church helped us go to flee to another state until things settled down. They feared for the life of our whole family. It was just very insidious.
Right.
I knew something was wrong.
So you fled. Did you have to be in hiding?
Yeah, I was really, really scared. I didn't
And
mention.
did you have help, or did you do it on your own?
Thankfully, I had a best friend, 2 women from my church, and that really helped because the church got very involved. I didn't mention, I should have, he is a former Navy SEAL.
Right.
And so that was something that
God.
he had always been, he had that line with a smirk,
Right.
I could kill you, if I tell you, I'll kill you. So you knew that there
Right.
were things he could do.
Right.
And
And I've heard that because I was in a band with a Navy SEAL, and he actually said that.
Oh yeah, I mean, and they can,
Right. Yeah.
they can.
Right.
So he just got he was accusing me of things that were crazy, even admit they were. So things just really got crazy.
Did you know much about his background besides being a Navy SEAL?
No, I learned about it.
Right.
I didn't know him very long.
Because did he have that violence in his background?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, his father
Right.
pretty much set the tone.
Because that's usually the case.
Yeah. And they're hidden secrets. That's why I've kept these things, pretty much a secret but I can't any longer because
Right.
that's what destroyed our family were the secrets.
So you're reading these for the first time, but do
In a long
you do
time.
open? Have you done? Do you read poetry?
No,
I know you're in bands.
I've been inspired by you, Pete, and Evie
nice.
Ivy.
Okay,
I
cool.
did. It took me a long time to think of myself as a singer-songwriter. I
Sure.
just didn't know I could write music, and
Right.
and then you're a singer-songwriter. I'm like, I am. So I do. Especially when Evie Ivy started coming to my open mic, she's this sweetest thing.
How'd you meet her?
I actually was involved in a boog, is it boog or moog?
Okay.
An event where I was singing at an event where she was doing her poetry. And
okay.
we became friends from then. That's
Nice.
about a year and a half ago.
Right.
And so I've been so impressed with how poets are, it's not, you just don't read your poem. And I want to learn how to do poetry. Because I think it's a whole different, avenue that's very powerful.
Right.
Your poetry, it's so powerful for you when you read
thank
it.
you.
So I love it.
I didn't I think I say this on every show, but it took me a long time to get to the point where I write, that I thought I could write.
Right.
And
Right.
in the past, I would not like what I wrote. And so I've discovered something that's become really important to my life, and it's happened really fast. So I was writing for, I guess, I thought it was 5, but it was actually 7 or 8 years before I put the book out.
Oh, wow.
And there's a couple things that led to actually saying, yeah, I'm going to put a book out, and came out. And then it was like, what's next? And there was the open mics. I love writing, and I don't force it. I tend to write when an idea comes, but it tends to come pretty often. But also at the same time, every time I write one, I'm sometimes wonder if it's going to be the last one or the last good one. But I keep doing it, and I love I love reading. It's two different things.
Right, they definitely are.
But I guess I always loved being on stage and being in front of a mic.
Nice.
You know, I did radio broadcasting, and it was in bands. And,
I can see that.
Yeah, and I hosted events. You know, quite a
Nice.
few. So I'm comfortable in the mic. But when I first did I can remember the first reading I went to was right before the pandemic, and I was really nervous. But it went well, and I'm getting encouraged by it, and I love it.
Yeah, you're so great.
Great.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah. Everyone
Thanks for
loved it
saying that.
last time for sure. Looking forward to this Sunday at 3 o'clock.
Yes. So yeah, we'll end with that.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about the open mic. Did you bring another one, or you read them all already?
Well, I have one more. It might be. I like to make it a little positive. It's called "Turn on Your Voice."
Okay. Cool.
Turn off the voices of those evil taunters. Forget their faces of those evil taunters, my precious ones. Your scars run deep, my precious ones. Your black heart seeps. You can't get back what was taken. I know your hearts are aching. Dear child, you have not been forsaken. Your faith in you is unshaken. You can't take back what was taken. They violated you at the break-in. My love for you is unmistaken. Breathe me, my child, time to awaken. Turn on your voices, my vital child. Reveal your faces, my beautiful child. My rivers fill you with my love. Soar from the mountains, my dove. You can't take back what was taken. You can't get back what was taken. Dear child, you have not been forsaken. My love for you is unmistaken.
Awesome. So, you know, I knew this was going to be a great episode. You know, sometimes you meet people and right away you feel a connection, and I felt that with you.
Nice, me too.
And I really liked the way you run the open mic. I didn't expect it to be this powerful because I didn't have any idea about your past. So there's a lot of subject matter in this show that I think other people need to hear, and it's beyond just the poetry. I do feel like when people are on the show, it's not just about what they read, but because your life story comes out in your poetry.
Definitely.
So we talked about your open mic. It's twice a month at Freddy's Bar, which is a classic Brooklyn bar. It has been since, I think it started in the 80s, although it had to move because of the Barclays Center. But if you don't mind, I want to read one thing.
Please.
I don't know if I shared this with you, but at the first open mic I went of yours, there was a singer there that was in the open mic, and then she did the next one as a feature. Her name is Aria.
The young girl.
Yeah.
So good.
And we both felt, after hearing her, that I think she's 12 or 13. I don't remember exactly which one. And her father plays with her. And I felt like I was listening to an old soul. And it was like the depth. She's a very talented musician, but the depth of her writing and the poetry in the music
Definitely
was way beyond her years. So I was inspired to write this. It's called Songbird. She has wisdom about life, though she's barely lived it, like an old soul who hadn't finished speaking. Stories in song about love that went missing, a yearning for something you can't put a finger on it, belief that there's sunshine coming after the hurricane is finished, that sometimes you get knocked down and have to get up and pick up the pieces. If your life was an opera, the best part is the aria sung by a singer taking a chance to expose her inner feelings. The audience taken aback by the beauty they just witnessed, thinking maybe reincarnation isn't just an academic position. So sing your songs, young songbird. The world is a better place with them in it.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yep, thanks.
I thought the same thing. Those words, I don't know where she gets them from. She's too
No,
young
they're
to
very deep.
experience. Very deep.
They really are. And, anyway.
It makes me believe in reincarnation or something.
That's why I
Yeah,
put that in there. Because,
definitely.
I don't disbelieve it. Who am I to know
Right.
about those kind of things?
Exactly.
Reincarnation, God or another, something out there bigger than us. As humans, we want to believe in something bigger than us.
And I think
bigger
music
than
and arts brings that forward,
Yes.
for sure.
Cool. So I think we're pretty. Did you want to say anything else about? Because you have a lot going on in your music life. Do you want to plug anything? Talk about the bands you're in.
Yeah. So I'm in a band where I play drums with Ruth Starr. It's called, and Donald Dixon. It's called the Rude Mimsey, and
Okay.
we're performing coming up the 10th for Santa Con.
Okay.
At Mike's Tavern.
I hope this winds up. I don't know the chronology of
gotcha.
the episodes. It may wind up before then.
And then we'll be back at on the 16th for an event at Otto's.
Okay.
And my other band, Sunshine Nightmare, where I play bass, we're just working on some recording for right now.
How do people find you out there in social media land?
Great question. At #Mimsey Mack.
All right, that's easy enough. Cool. So it's been great having you on the show.
Yes, Pete,
It was
thank you
really
so
powerful.
much.
I'm deeply moved.
Oh,
and,
thank you.
Got a lot to think about after this episode. I want to thank the audience for staying tuned, but most of all, I want to thank Mimsey Mack for opening up and reading her poetry, and it was really nice having you, and I'm glad I met you, and I'm looking forward to our possible collaborations moving forward.
Yes.
So, again, this is Storytelling on Orchard Street in the P&T Knitwear bookstore on Orchard Street. Come check the P&T out, buy some books, get educated, and thank you. And have a good rest of the day that you're participating and listening to us. Bye-bye.